poker ambassador Phil Hellmuth has dropped a bombshell on the poker world with a recent announcement that he will not be participating in the 2025 World Series of Poker main event. As I'm sure many of you guys know, Phil Hellmuth has won the most bracelets in the history of the World Series of Poker, winning 17 bracelets over the course of 1989 to 2023, a long resume of winning many large field tournaments across generations of poker players. This is a giant announcement from Phil to say this, because this guy loves the World Series of Poker and has played every main event since 1988, which was, by all accounts, quite the year for poker. It was my birthday. I have a very interesting theory about what's going on here, but before I tell you that, let's go ahead and look at what Phil had to say over on Twitter.
Folks, here's a video I never wanted to make. So the World Series of Poker main event, I played it every year since 1988. I will not be playing it this year. It's just too tough. It's just too tough. You know, people at home are like, oh, Phil, you can play 7 days in a row. Yeah, try it. Try getting up and playing at noon until midnight. 7 days in a row. And then they're, oh, well, today we have to play till 2 or 3 in the morning, which also happens at the WSOP main event. It's just exhausting, and I can't win.
Wow, if Phil Hellmuth is saying he can't win, this is a serious issue. This guy doesn't like to admit defeat on anything. Although, he did have to throw in the towel on that hot dog eating contest.
God damn it, I hate losing to Doug Pope.
You're dunking your hot dogs?
I hate losing to Doug Pope, but that was an impressive performance.
You had a system? And the winner is...
But back to Phil.
And I think that it really hurts the older players in a much bigger proportion than the younger players. And I'll say this, I had 4 great players come and tell me that they blew the main event because they got too tired with 50 left, with 30 left, with 100 left. It's turned into an endurance test. I don't think that the World Series of Poker main event is measuring skill. It's still my favorite event in the world. Don't misunderstand me. I don't want to miss it. But I know that I can't do that. You know, I'm 60 years old. I know. I don't think I could have done it at age 50. So I think the World Series of Poker is set up as an endurance test, and we're losing a lot. And if you go out there and you poll the players on whether or not they should have days off in the main event, 80% are going to say yes. And the 20%, because I did a little polling myself, the 20% that don't, they're the guys who are 20 years old.
Ah, yes, all of those 20-year-olds playing in the World Series of Poker main event. You know, I've felt it for a long time, but the World Series of Poker should really crack down on illegal gambling.
Yeah, people get tired, they blow all their chips. Of course we want it to be 10 days straight. But I don't think that's what the World Series of Poker should be about. People getting tired and blowing their chips. So it's going to really hurt me to not play in the world's best poker tournament, the World Series of Poker main event. But in 2025, I'm out. I hope that in 2026 there's some changes made so that, you know, so that we can restore more skill and less endurance. I really hope they make those changes, because I don't know if I can do an entrance this year either. So I guess I'm just out. Folks, I love the World Series of Poker. Very important to me, but just can't play the main event.
Wow, this says a lot for someone like Phil Hellmuth that has played this event so many years in a row, who obviously deeply in his soul cares about playing in this series and his reputation and its reputation and being a part of it. He's been on the news teams. He's been deep in the main. He's won the main. This is clearly a giant thing for someone like Phil to feel like they can't even compete. He just can't even hang anymore. And so this brings up some really big questions about the format. Has it become too much? I imagine what got this ball rolling was that the World Series of Poker made their announcement with their 2025 Summer Series with all of their events and the schedule that they're going to be using for this year. On there, we can see that the main event starts July 2nd and it ends on July 16th. A 2-week-long series, basically, of just one event. That is a freeze out. If you're eliminated, you cannot re-enter. To contrast this, in 1989, when Phil Hellmuth won the main, the entire World Series of Poker took 2 weeks. So now, just the main event takes the same length as the entire World Series of Poker. Just a slight increase in time. We also have so many different starting days and starting flights and certain flights combining. You know, we have day 1A, day 1B, day 2ABC, day 2D, JZ. We have so many different flights here. It's hard to keep track of all of them. And frankly, when you have 10,000 people playing an event and the levels are super, super long, 120-minute levels, it's gonna take a really long time to crown one luck box that we all hate. One World Series of Poker main event champion. The World Series of Poker this year has 100 bracelet events. It's mainly events that you've heard of before, you've seen before, but Poker News did a good job of organizing it out into some of the new events that are going to be added to the schedule this year, which includes a very interesting Battle of the Ages event, where essentially day 1A has a flight where players are 50 years old or older, and then day 1B is for people under the age of 50. This is the World Series version of what Triton does when they have a big tournament. They make all the pros play together, and then all of the recs can play together. It's kind of the same thing. It's pretty similar. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of quarter pot bets in the over 50s event. The schedule also includes a few new PLO events. Obviously, PLO events have been doing better and better, and there's been a lot of money up top to be able to win. In fact, Upswing's own Dylan Wiseman has been crushing the PLO circuit over the last few years. If you want to learn from Dylan, we actually have a great introductory course that costs just $99. If you are a no-limit player and you want to start playing PLO at a high level, you can head over to upswingpoker.com and purchase the PLO Launchpad, where Dylan gets you up to speed with the basics of Pot Limit Omaha for people like me that have always played 2 cards. Probably should have taken this course before playing some high-stakes PLO. The great part about this course is, unlike coaching agreements with Ben Tollering, you're actually going to receive your PLO coaching. Back to the schedule, we have a bunch of high-stakes stuff. We have some new mixed game stuff. We have a lot of different events here, although it also seems like the rake is probably going to be going up for a lot of these events.
It's actually better.
Poker News also broke down the rake at the different buy-in levels here in these tournaments. Overall, I would say it's maybe slightly high, probably slightly high, but all in all, pretty competitive. And I checked the $300 buy-in level, and it was actually the same last year as this year. I don't know if the rake went up. I don't know if the rake went down, and I'm not that interested in it. But if you care, and you probably should if you're going to play some of these, you might want to check it out and see what's happened to events at your buy-in level. Back to Phil Hellmuth, though. So Phil Hellmuth says this has become about endurance and not skill. And it's hard to really argue that the endurance component of the World Series of Poker main event hasn't become a primary factor. The event now lasts for 2 weeks. And while in the first few days, you probably get some days off as they get through all of the different flights, once the flights do combine, you're playing all the way down to a final table with 120-minute levels. And it is extremely true what Phil Hellmuth is saying about how some nights it goes late. That happens frequently, particularly as it gets closer to the final table, because there are certain numbers of players that the event coordinators, that the floor managers know they have to get down to, and sometimes they just play until they get there. I have certainly seen years where play goes all the way until 3 or 4 in the morning while you're playing your 5th, 6th, 7th day of poker in a row. It is absolutely grueling, and frankly, I just don't understand how so many people sign up and are willing to do it. Oh wait, actually, I figured out why. I'm going to say this. I have on more than one occasion on this channel disagreed with Phil Hellmuth. All in all, I think that Phil Hellmuth is great to have in the poker world. But sometimes he's been outlandish and has done things I don't agree with. But on this particular take, I think Phil is dead on the money. This has become way, way, way too much. And I can tell you, I have a good number of friends that play poker casually now. They might run businesses. They played poker professionally back in the day. Maybe they invested in crypto. Maybe whatever they're doing today, where for many of them, if the World Series of Poker main event was relatively easy to play, they would probably play. But when they look at the schedule and go, oh, I have to leave my job, my company, my family for potentially 2 weeks to play just one event, if I get lucky enough to make it deep, it does drastically impact the decision that they have to make, where they have to decide, am I willing to set all of this time aside? Now, I think that the endurance component of the main event is part of the event. There's no way when you have 10,000 people ponying up $10,000 that you're going to be able to quickly weed them all out. No, you're going to have a structure that rewards people that can play disciplined good poker for the long haul. but I do think there are some tweaks that we can make that would improve this event. Here is my extremely simple fix to the World Series of Poker main event. Make the levels 90 minutes. And here's what you can do. You can add an extra level in per day. Days will still be shorter than normal, so you don't have quite so many late nights. Hard stop this thing at the end of the final level. Don't have these days where you go super late to try and play down to certain numbers. And then take the extra time that you have to put an off day, probably after day 5 or maybe 6, where if players have managed to make it that deep, they're going to want to have an off day to rest up and play well. And also, if you're down to the last 50, 100, 150, 200 players, with that much money up top, you are totally fine to take a little extra time off and wait and rest up and play your A game. I really do think it's time for the levels to come down a little bit. If the World Series of Poker doesn't want to cap the number of entrants into the field, which they obviously don't, they want the largest number of unique entries possible, then you're going to have to, at some point, put something in place to reduce the amount of time this thing takes. Now, you could also look into changing the blinds. Maybe you slightly raise the speed, but I don't think that's actually necessary. I like the blind structure for this event. There's a reason it's the #1 best event in the world. But I do think if we have the levels be very long, 90 minutes is still a very long level, and we have a slowly escalating blind structure, you get to keep almost everything while fixing some aspects of this event. And I really do think it could bring everything together. What do you think in the comments below? Do you like my idea of 90-minute levels as a solution here? Let me know what you think. But I do have a theory, potentially, about what's going on here. Because Phil also said this very interesting thing at the end.
Because I don't know if I can do an entrance this year either.
This feels like a kind of weird note to throw in, right? So let's just say, for example, Phil was planning on playing the whole schedule and he was going to do his entrance. Why would he now not do the entrance while also not playing the main? And I have two potential theories, hypothetical, but potential theories. First off, this is what I think might be happening. I think there's a chance that the World Series of Poker said, Phil, we don't want the grand entrance this year. We're going to be focused on other stuff. It's a distraction. We're not going to allow you to do it. In which case, maybe Phil is frustrated with the main event and says, okay, you know what? I'm not going to play the main event then. That's option number one. Option number two, perhaps he is saying, if you don't change the main, I'm going to take this away from you. I won't do my entrance, which I know you guys like because it gets a bunch of views every year. I'm not going to do that unless you fix the main. Could go either way. I'm not sure which one it is, but they both kind of make sense because otherwise, why would you say this? It's tough sometimes for me to say what I think about tournament poker because I was never that concerned with, structures and days of play. I kind of just fired an event if I wanted to fire an event. And ultimately, I realized I prefer cash games. But you do want to have tournaments that have a great structure and do not last so long that they're prohibitive from living your normal life. Which is why I think one of the best tournaments that you can play is the Lodge LCS Championship Main Event, $1 million guaranteed, coming up in just a week or two here with many satellite winners. This event is going to be extremely high value, and the final table will be streamed on our exclusive poker studio. So if you like to play high value events, head on down to Lodge Card Club for our $3,000 main event. It's our biggest championship event of the year, and we're not going to make you play for a full week. So you can come on down, Phil. You're in good hands. One last thing before we go. Do you guys agree with Phil Hellmuth on this? I'm going to put some polls up on Twitter, maybe on Instagram, and ask, do you agree with Phil Hellmuth? Should there be off days in the World Series of Poker main event? Let me know. I want to see your vote. Phil says players he's talked to, it's 80-20. Let's see what the actual audience thinks about this. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say. Usually. Sometimes. Well, actually, most of it's probably going to be gibberish, but I do read it. For better or worse.